Greetings. All right. Wow. Here comes my kitty. Yeah. Let's see. How do I look today? So I do these like no makeup days like today. So here we are. But so today the reading I'm going to read from we're in page 124 about failure. And it's been really interesting for me because I've like this book contains some kind of like magic beyond my comprehension. And as I'm reading it, it actually is often very topical. And failure is something that's really topical, I think. And I'm going to read from this, and then I'm going to like fill in a little bit in terms of why it's topical and some points of interest as it relates to that. So my cat is looking at me. Look at that hair. It's really funny. Okay. All right. So failure. Um, we're often socialized to believe in a polarized system of pass fail or win loss that casts failure in absolute terms. Yet, within an infinite spectrum of possible outcomes, failure is subjective and simply provides a lesson, a speed bump, or an embarrassment. What's typically considered failure is simply the disappointment of missing the mark you intended to hit. Often, often publicly, right? I mean, when we do it right, when we're good at failing, we're doing it in public. The fortitude to try again is largely tied to how much energy we have after a disappointment. So the trick's to not let disappointment be what Buddhists call the second arrow. In the parable of two arrows, the first arrow is the disappointment itself, which we can't always control. The second arrow is our reaction to the first. The second arrow is optional. There's a powerful paradox in complementary opposites when we can simultaneously hold on and let go. That is, having the courage to pursue something you want with passion and focus, but also understand that in the larger context of things, everything is permanent, and so-called failure is okay. The Bhagavad Gita references this power of detachment with a quote, with a passage: "Do thy work, O winner of wealth, abandoning attachment, with an even mind in success and failure." This is an esoteric concept, but it has practical applications. Intense execution of a business plan in concert with the counterforce of ease, simultaneous intensity, and ease together exert a powerful force. There's nothing that can diminish your power in a high pressure situation more than appearing desperate or nervous about failure. George Orwell alluded to this in Down and Out in Paris and London. Quote, "It is fatal to look hungry. It makes people want to kick you." End quote. To internally cultivate a counterforce to pressure, make a list of what matters to you that doesn't change if you miss your mark. It can contain people and pets who love you, things you enjoy doing, and personal truths that are the bedrock of your values. Hold on to them, also knowing that there's not a single person or transaction that can be completely responsible for shaping your destiny. Then go fight for what you want. The likelihood of a favorable outcome will be fueled by the energy of your conviction, your focused determination, and your ability to learn and iterate when things don't go as planned. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. You know, I think a lot about failure is embarrassment. And And I think it really fits nicely, not just in terms of doing, which is what we're in the 3rd hub, but also the interruptions and the shadows in the 1st hub in the 3rd hub rather, that have to do with shame and criticism. And let me think through this. Yeah. Yep. I think the idea that making mistakes proves something about our inherent worth. And what we get into in this chapter is what was kind of alluded to in that passage, which is about the like really having a self-contained sense of value and worth that is not that's not subject to kind of like the vicissitudes of other people's opinions. And there and the I think one of the things I think especially in having had a career in sales is realizing that you just there's no predicting where other people are coming from in a given day and the factors that impact their mood and how they approach you and even what they see in you is largely impacted by their own projections of based off their own experiences. So we get really, it's like the thing, it's like when we're not living, so this is like the living from the inside out. We're actually first coming from our own in like the internal sense and things that we've cultivated in our like, within ourselves that have to do with our worth and our value and understanding what we want. And a lot of what we do in Parinama method is, it's not uncommon that people are waiting for external validation to inform whether they feel good about stuff and whether people find them attractive or whether people think their work is like good or whether people are nice to us, like that our day is good based off of external things. And what I'd like to just suggest in this is that it's starting from the internal, like, it's really coming from the inside out, and then getting validation, and then making the decision about how you interact with that validation. So, failure is really potent when how other people judge us, and based off of all those things that I was just mentioning, is what decides how we feel. And I remember when I used to when I would sell back in the old country, and I would reach out to people. I just because if you do it like a lot, like it's one of the things about working in sales is you repeat these things over and over and over and over again. You just see that it's like there's nothing I can do really. Like or there how people respond to me is largely going to be impacted by the factors and things of their own life. And so when we tether our sense of how we feel to really honestly like what I'd call like unpredictable and quite frankly like unstable validations, then it's understandable that things are hard. It's understandable that we're afraid of putting ourselves out there because if we put ourselves out there, we're really making ourselves subject to people, like to things that are like so far outside of our control, and also being judged by people, right? I mean, that's kind of like a whole thing, you know. But if the primary judgment is coming from within, and it's like our bedrock is being the foundation is like about who we are and what our values are and our relationship with ourselves first, it really makes the experience of failure really different. And so, this might be kind of boring for some people, but, as far as, the Parinama school, the class last week, um, like I got really nervous at the beginning of it, which really surprised me. and I started, like, sweating, and the thing that was imperceptible, I think, to people, but I think it's like what, or maybe completely perceptible, but, was that I couldn't really think super clearly because it's just like stress, a stress on the nervous system makes easy things hard and then hard things impossible. So, like, I was struggling to think very clearly off of a class plan that I had spent a lot of time working on, like, a lot of time working on. And so, all of a sudden, I was, kind of just, like, unfocused and nervous, and I couldn't deliver it really as succinctly and clearly as I'd intended to. And I felt really like this huge responsibility about, like, the importance of portraying this effectively when people are giving their time and energy to it. And, while I was, like, sweating profusely at the beginning, it's interesting because it was, like, when I hung up and I put like, an extraordinary, like, it's, like, a lot of work. Um and with the intention that it's gonna be, like, really impactful and well received and all this kind of stuff, my idea, my hope for this was, like, I hung up and I felt like I've gotten kinda, like, beat up, in terms of, like, when I ended the class, like, the sense of being like, um let's see, I'm gonna close this thing out. That helps without blinking. Yeah, and so it was kind of like I hadn't been triumphant in a way that I'm used to being triumphant. I'm used to being a pretty confident presenter, and this is subject matter that's extraordinarily important to me. So the thing about it was that, and then afterwards, just the process of really going through how it could be better. And the thing is, like, how so it's like when I'm talking about failures, just being able to be like, brush it off. I think um I don't think that's like that I don't think that that's a helpful or an honest, um, sort of direction about it. The fact is that it does hurt a little bit, like, it's, or a lot of bit, or it feel whatever arises, even just with an expectation not met. And, I think I was like, part of me that made me really nervous was the idea that I would lose an opportunity for people. Like, it's like with this work, it's really different than it used to be where I was worried about losing financial opportunities. This is feels like way more important. And so for me to feel like, "Oh my gosh, am I blowing this or losing the audience?" Or like they're one shot my kinda like one bite at the apple for somebody to like approach this and be like receptive to it, and it's like really chaotic. So I'm kinda making a meal out of this one point. I'm belaboring it probably a little too much, but the thing is that I guess being like pretty like sort of having a certain amount of fitness in terms of like looking like stupid. And I think one of the things about being an executive and having been somebody who sold large deals, like did a lot of stuff in like selling, like there's a lot of practice in doing things poorly and then figuring out how to correct, especially with how I do it, like where I build organizations from scratch. So it's kind of like iterating from nothing and like mistaking your way into success. Mistaking your way to success. Because the key thing is just the iteration. And that was the thing where it was like I was kind of bummed out. I remember I logged out of the call and I was like, oh, that's like not how I thought that was gonna feel. I thought I was gonna feel like super like, yes, we're off to the races. And instead I was like, oh wow, that was like kind of I was just really, felt out of control. But the thing is like with that, is like in that is the gold. Like in that and that thing about how lucky I was that people gave me feedback I think one of the things is that sometimes it's like, in the hurt of the embarrassment or the disappointment of something not being, up to the standard we hope for, people, like, don't say anything to us 'cause they don't want us to feel worse, and we can be perpetrators of that because it's like we're feeling so bad about it, and people go, "Oh, it wasn't that bad, it wasn't that bad," and quite frankly, it wasn't that bad, but that's not the point, like, that's not where I'm trying to get to as far as, like, what I care is about the service of this work and, like, what this represents and what's possible for people, reaching people. So, about my sense of whether, like, I was cool or whether it was, like, less of a concern, and my concern was more about, like, is this content organized and presented in a way that people are going to engage with it? 'Cause there's, like, nothing in the world I want more than for the people that this can, like, really access and activate to have access to it. So, yeah. So but the thing is there was a second wave with that, which was that I got really energized by the possibility of how much better it could get. 'Cause there were, look, for those of you who gave me feedback, hopefully, and it's gotten better, even better over time, is that, like, knowing how much I relish the opportunity to hear about how something can be better, especially with this. I think sometimes with the business development stuff, I was like, "Eh, it's good enough." Get the job done. It's not totally true. But anyway, I mean, this is a road too far probably on this topic. Um it's kind of interesting because one of the things I wrote about in this section, um, which kind of it surprised me because, to be honest, when I was reading it, it didn't really resonate with my thinking like, my experience right now with failure felt like a little bit disconnected. Um, yeah, it felt like this reads a bit like someone who is not, like, in the throes of having to deal with the vulnerability. Like, it's sort of like it seems really academic, to be honest. I was reading it and I was like, it feels like a little bit like a motivational speech from somebody who doesn't have any, skin in the game. So, like but there's some points in here, and I will say one of them is, like, I don't even know how much it has to do with failure, honestly. Maybe part of the issue is that I don't know how much this passage has to do with failure. But one thing I think, even in terms of approaching things that we're trying to achieve, is it is this really paradoxical, this dichotomy rather between wanting something badly enough that it's really that, like, you approach it with, like, intense concentration and focus, and you do your absolute best in the work, but you also maintain a larger contextual attitude of the fact that it's like, well, in the larger scheme of things, if this doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. It just means we have to work harder. And even we may not have to work harder. It may be that this isn't the right opportunity, for us, because it would be too much of a thing where we have to, like, really convince somebody. And there might be somebody who maybe it is easier. We present this and they just immediately get it. And then they're like an amazing, partnership. So it's kind of this thing where it's like giving it everything and simultaneously having a certain level of, like, looseness and receptivity to, like, that, like, having both intensity and ease, these complementary opposites, and the ways that this plays out even in the, like, in the Parinama verse, is that this is supporting emotional regulation and nervous system regulation within the things that are, like, feel really high stakes and that we care about. So it's being able to like, give something our best which can be really vulnerable, like the idea that we're like trying our hardest and we're showing up with our full potential and that might not win the day, is realizing it just might be the wrong day. Like, and so it's kind of like, look, do the work to get there, do the work to like with what you have and what you want to accomplish. And kind of it'll iterate into the right place if you keep showing up for it. But even in like business development, when I'm talking like when you're talking about meetings and pitches and running deals and winning things, that to have that intensity and that control and like, this is what we created, this is what I want, is, it's not great for someone else to feel like what you're trying to do is like get steer your destiny in a way like where you can't actually respond to like a bigger picture. So there's more that can be said on that. I could zoom back out on that. And when we get into negotiation and conflict, we'll talk a little bit more about that because there's like there's a bigger picture in that. So, I don't know what I'd rate this section. I mean, it's got some like good content in it. It's like I read it and I'm like, yeah, it's good stuff, but yeah, maybe. I don't know, you tell me. You tell me. Is this kind of like, it's all right. Maybe it's just my mood. Maybe it's just an objective fact that this is like 6 out of 10. I mean, because it's like I feel it. So I will say that one of the things about writing the book is that it's like the process of like build creating the framework. I mean, this whole thing is a framework and everything is like fitting into like um let's see, like fitting into fitting into the components of it. And sometimes there were things that would arise that were really like the content itself was really strong, but it just had nowhere where it fit particularly well. And I can't help but wonder if this might be kind of along in that kind of space because I think there's some good kind of content in here, but I don't feel like facing failure that like as somebody who's like in the mix right now with dealing with the discomfort of trying new things and being outside of like my zone of of comfort as far as the things I know how to do. Like I'm doing stuff I don't know how to do like multiple times in a day. I'm creating new things and I'm doing new things and having different conversations. And honestly, reading that didn't give me much comfort. So there's that. So anyway, all right. So that's it for today. Tomorrow, if this is chronological, which it really isn't going to be, for yeah, tomorrow is the next Parinoma class for the first cohort. I'm very excited about that. Super grateful for everyone. If you've made it this far watching this, I'm so grateful. Mira, of course, you're like my ride or die on these. We're in this together. Yeah. Look, if anybody else wants to start commenting, I'll talk to you too. But right now, Mira's my like, yeah, my companion in this journey. So anyway, I want to say thank you so much to you, and I can't wait until next time. All right. Bye for now.